My daughter tried to poison my dog after I put it in my will. I had her arrested at the vet's office. The frantic barking of Buster, my faithful golden retriever, was the first alarm bell, a sound of pure terror that jolted me awake. It wasn't his usual playful yip or his excited greeting. This was a desperate, choked series of cries, laced with a fear I'd never heard before. My heart leaped into my throat. Buster was my world, my constant companion, the warm, furry anchor that kept me grounded in life. His sudden distress was an immediate, chilling premonition. I scrambled out of bed, the floorboards creaking under my hurried steps, my mind already racing through 1,000 worst-case scenarios. What could possibly be happening to my precious boy? The sound grew more desperate, a rasping wheeze now accompanying the barks, and I knew, with a sickening certainty, that this was no ordinary upset. This was something far, far worse. I found him in the living room, not pacing or whining as he usually would if he needed something, but collapsed near his water bowl, his body trembling violently. His usually bright, liquid brown eyes were clouded with pain, and his breathing was shallow, ragged. A pool of something thick and white, foamy, had gathered around his muzzle. Panic, sharp and cold, seized me. My Buster, my loyal, loving Buster, was clearly in agony. Without a second thought, I scooped him up, his weight surprisingly heavy in my arms, and rushed to the car. The drive to the veterinary clinic felt like an eternity, each second punctuated by Buster's weak whimpers and my own racing thoughts. What could have happened? He hadn't eaten anything unusual, hadn't been out in the yard unsupervised. Then, as I carefully maneuvered him into the passenger's seat, my eyes fell on his water bowl. Beside it, barely visible on the dark wood floor, was a small, almost invisible residue of white powder. A chill that had nothing to do with the morning air snaked down my spine. At the veterinary clinic, the atmosphere was one of hushed urgency. Dr. Anya Sharma, Buster's longtime vet, took one look at him and immediately ushered us into an examination room. Her expression, usually warm and reassuring, was now etched with concern as she began her examination. As she gently palpated Buster's abdomen and checked his gums, I explained everything, my voice trembling, recounting the terrifying scene at home. I mentioned the white powder, my suspicion growing stronger with every word. Dr. Sharma, a woman of quiet competence and immense kindness, listened intently, her brow furrowed. She collected a sample of the residue from Buster's mouth and the water bowl, and then, with a grim look, she administered a dose of activated charcoal and started an IV to help flush his system. While Buster was being stabilized, Dr. Sharma returned to the examination room, her face grave. "I've run a preliminary toxicology screen," she said, her voice low. "Based on the symptoms and the preliminary findings, it strongly indicates he ingested a significant amount of strychnine. It's a highly potent poison, and if he hadn't been brought in so quickly, the outcome could have been very different." Strychnine. The word hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath. My beautiful, innocent Buster, deliberately poisoned. The realization was a gut-wrenching betrayal, a wound far deeper than any physical injury. Who would do such a thing? And why? The image of that white powder flashed in my mind, and a terrible, horrifying suspicion began to take root. That suspicion, once planted, grew with terrifying speed. My daughter, Sarah. She had always been resentful of Buster, ever since he became my primary focus after her father's passing. She saw him as an unwanted interloper, a furry rival for my attention and, more recently, my affections. And then there was the will. A few months ago, in a moment of clarity and perhaps a touch of morbid foresight, I had amended my will. While a substantial portion would still go to Sarah, I had also made a specific, significant bequest to a local animal sanctuary, contingent on Buster being well and cared for, with a portion of his inheritance also earmarked for his continued care. The idea had been to ensure Buster's comfort and well-being for the rest of his natural life, no matter what happened to me. But what if Sarah, in her perceived entitlement and her growing impatience for what she considered her rightful inheritance, saw Buster as an obstacle? an obstacle to be removed, along with my generous donations to the sanctuary. The thought was monstrous, almost unbelievable, yet it fit the chilling pieces together. I remembered Sarah's increasingly barbed comments about Buster, her petulance when I prioritized his needs, her thinly veiled suggestions that he was too much trouble. I thought back to yesterday. Sarah had visited, and Buster had been particularly enthusiastic, greeting her with his usual wagging tail and happy licks. Sarah had barely acknowledged him, her eyes holding a flicker of something cold and hard as Buster nudged her hand. She'd left shortly after, muttering something about having errands to run, errands that might have included acquiring a deadly poison. The vet's office, once a place of comfort and healing, now felt like a stage for an unfolding tragedy. Dr. Sharma was examining Buster, a concerned frown on her face, while I, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, was on the phone with Detective Miller, a sharp, no-nonsense officer I knew from previous, less dramatic, community matters. I explained the situation, the suspected poisoning, the motive I now harbored. Detective Miller listened patiently, his tone shifting from polite inquiry to grave seriousness as I laid out the facts and my suspicions. "Mr. Adams," he said, his voice calm but firm, "we take allegations of animal cruelty, especially poisoning, very seriously. And if your suspicions about your daughter's involvement are founded, we will act." He instructed me to remain at the clinic, to keep Buster under observation, and to wait for his officers. He also suggested a strategy. "If you believe she might return, or if you can arrange for her to be at the clinic for any reason, we can intercept her there. It would be a controlled environment, and we'd have our best people ready." The plan solidified in my mind. Sarah had mentioned needing to pick up some prescription medication for her cat from the vet's affiliated pharmacy, which was located within the same building complex. It was a perfect, albeit chilling, opportunity. I discreetly contacted Sarah, my voice carefully neutral, feigning concern. "Sarah, dear," I began, "Buster is at the vet's. It seems he ingested something. They're looking after him, but I'm worried. Could you pop over to the pharmacy to pick up some of Fluffy's medication? I'm a bit tied up here with Buster's care." She agreed, her voice lacking any genuine concern, a familiar note of self-absorption in her tone. As I hung up, a grim resolve settled over me. I was no longer just a worried pet owner. I was a protector, an avenger. The waiting in the examination room was excruciating. Buster was resting comfortably, sedated. The IV drip, a lifeline keeping him stable. Dr. Sharma kept me updated on his progress, her quiet reassurances doing little to quell the tempest in my soul. Every passing car, every footstep in the hallway sent a fresh jolt of anxiety through me. Would she come? Would my suspicions be confirmed in the most horrific way imaginable? Then, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Detective Miller's discreet nod to a uniformed officer outside the door. They were here. A few moments later, Sarah appeared in the doorway, looking bored and slightly impatient. She scanned the room, her eyes briefly landing on Buster, then quickly dismissing him. "Is everything all right, Dad?" she asked, her tone perfunctory. "Fluffy's medication is ready?" As she took a step further into the room, Detective Miller and another officer entered, their presence commanding immediate attention. Sarah froze, her bored expression replaced by confusion, then a flicker of alarm. "Who are you?" she demanded, turning to me. Detective Miller stepped forward, his voice calm but authoritative. "Sarah Adams," he began, his gaze steady. "I'm Detective Miller. We have reason to believe you may be involved in an incident of animal poisoning. We need to ask you some questions." Sarah's face drained of color. Her eyes darted between me and the officers, her initial indignation replaced by a dawning horror. "Poisoning? What are you talking about? I didn't do anything." Her denial was immediate, fierce, but it lacked conviction. The careful neutrality I had maintained cracked as I met her gaze. The truth, brutal and undeniable, hung in the air between us. The accusation, spoken aloud in this sterile room, echoed with the weight of betrayal, and the stark reality of her actions. The plan had worked, the trap had been sprung, and now justice, in its cold, unyielding form, was about to be served. Sarah's denial was a thin veil, easily pierced by the undeniable truth of her presence and the cold accusation. Her face, usually so animated, was now a mask of pale terror. Her eyes, those same eyes that had so often reflected my love and pride, now held a desperate, cornered look. She glanced at Buster, a flicker of something unreadable. Guilt? Annoyance? Crossing her features before she quickly looked away, as if the sight of my suffering dog was too much to bear. I don't understand, she stammered, her voice trembling. What is this about? Detective Miller's gaze was unwavering. We have evidence suggesting that Buster was deliberately poisoned, Ms. Adams. Specifically, with strychnine. He was found in a critical condition at your father's home this morning. My breath hitched. Hearing it stated so baldly, so professionally, made it all the more real, more horrifying. Sarah's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. A tremor ran through her body, and her hands flew to her mouth as if to stifle a scream. Strychnine! Buster! Poisoned? Her voice was a strangled whisper. That's impossible. Who would do such a thing? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusation. I looked at her, and for the first time I saw it clearly. The entitlement, the resentment, the coldness that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long. It wasn't just a childish jealousy of a pet. It was something far more sinister, a willingness to inflict harm to achieve her perceived ends. The evidence points towards someone who had access to your father's home and who may have had a motive, Sarah. Detective Miller continued, his tone even. We found residue of a white powder near Buster's water bowl. Preliminary tests indicated it is consistent with strychnine. Sarah's eyes widened and she backed away, bumping into the doorframe. No, that's not true. I didn't. I would never. But her words were hollow. The sheer panic in her eyes was more telling than any confession. She knew, and she was caught. Sarah, I said, my voice rough, choked with emotion. Why? Why would you do this to Buster? The question, uttered with a lifetime of love and trust now shattered, seemed to break her completely. Her composure shattered, and tears began to stream down her face, hot and fast. It's not fair, she sobbed, the words tumbling out in a rush. It's not fair. He always gets everything, all your attention, all your love, and now the will. He gets a chunk of my inheritance. A stupid dog gets more than I do. The raw venom in her voice was chilling. The resentment I had sensed for so long had festered into something truly monstrous. She saw Buster not as a beloved companion, but as a financial burden, a rival, an obstacle to her perceived birthright. He's just a dog, Dad, she cried, her voice escalating. He's not family. He's just an animal, and you love him more than me. The accusation, so childish and yet so devastating, landed like a physical blow. I had poured my heart and soul into raising her, into being a good father. And in her eyes, all of that was negated by my love for my dog. Detective Miller interjected, his voice firm, cutting through the emotional storm. Ms. Adams, based on your father's statement and your own admission of motive, we are placing you under arrest on suspicion of animal poisoning and attempted cruelty. 2 uniformed officers stepped forward, their movements efficient and practiced. Sarah let out a wail, a sound of pure, unadulterated despair and fear. She didn't resist as they gently but firmly took her arms. No, you can't. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted him to be gone, she shrieked, her voice cracking. He's always in the way. The words, laced with a casual cruelty, were more than I could bear. I watched, numb, as they led her away, her sobs echoing in the sterile hallway. The image of Buster, trembling and in agony, flashed in my mind. The betrayal was profound, a gaping wound in the fabric of my family. Dr. Sharma approached me, her expression a mixture of pity and professional detachment. "Mr. Adams, Buster is stable for now. The charcoal and IV are working. We'll continue to monitor him closely. He's a fighter." I nodded, unable to speak. My world had imploded in the span of a few hours. My loyal companion, poisoned by my own daughter. The love I had for Buster was fierce, protective, and now it was intertwined with a devastating grief and a profound sense of loss for the daughter I thought I knew. The ride home was a blur. The house felt unnervingly silent without Buster's cheerful presence. I sat in his favorite spot on the rug, the space where he usually rested his head on my lap, now achingly empty. The smell of disinfectant from the vet's office clung to me, a stark reminder of the morning's horrors. Detective Miller had been thorough. He'd taken statements from me, from Sarah, and from Dr. Sharma. He'd secured the evidence, the residue from Buster's bowl and muzzle. He'd also informed me that Sarah would be processed and released on bail pending further investigation, but that the charges were serious. The days that followed were a surreal fog. Buster was recovering, his energy slowly returning, but the trauma had left its mark. He was more clingy, often seeking my reassurance with a nudge of his head or a gentle lick. I found myself constantly watching him, a knot of anxiety perpetually in my stomach, half expecting something else to happen. The legal proceedings were swift, at least in their initial stages. Sarah had a court-appointed lawyer. Her bail conditions included no contact with me or Buster. The thought of her being free, of her potentially trying to reach him again, was unbearable. I had to protect Buster. The will, the catalyst for this nightmare, became a source of agonizing contemplation. How could I ensure Buster's future when my own daughter was capable of such depravity? The sanctuary I had intended to benefit was still a good cause, but the thought of any part of my estate ultimately going to Sarah, even indirectly, felt like a final, unbearable betrayal. I contacted my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. He listened patiently as I recounted the events, his face a mask of professional concern. "This is a deeply disturbing situation, Mr. Adams," he said, his voice grave. "Your daughter's actions are indefensible, and the evidence seems compelling. Regarding the will, we need to discuss your options. Given her criminal conduct, it may be possible to contest her inheritance or, at the very least, to ensure her access to any funds is strictly controlled and not for personal use if she's convicted." The legalities felt cold and distant compared to the raw pain I was experiencing. I wanted justice, yes, but more than that, I wanted my life back. I wanted my daughter, the one I remembered, before this darkness consumed her. But that daughter, it seemed, was gone, replaced by a stranger capable of inflicting such cruelty. The news of Sarah's arrest and the allegations spread through our small community like wildfire. Neighbors I'd known for years offered sympathetic glances and hushed whispers. Some avoided me altogether, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and revulsion. It was a lonely time. My focus remained on Buster. His recovery was my sole purpose. I spent hours with him, brushing his coat, playing gentle games of fetch in the backyard, and simply holding him close, drawing comfort from his steady presence. He was my anchor in this storm, a reminder of the pure, unconditional love that still existed in the world, even if it had been so brutally corrupted within my own family. The legal process began to unfold. Sarah was indicted. The evidence against her was strong. The prosecution presented the toxicology reports, my testimony, and the fact that she was present at the veterinary clinic when asked to come by her father, where she was apprehended by law enforcement. The motive, as outlined by my testimony, was clear: resentment over Buster and financial gain. The preliminary hearing was a blur of legal jargon and tense courtroom atmosphere. Sarah sat beside her lawyer, her face impassive, a stark contrast to the tearful, panicked woman I'd seen at the vet's office. The prosecution presented its case, detailing the events of that morning. My testimony was difficult, reliving the horror of finding Buster poisoned, the crushing realization of my daughter's culpability. During cross-examination, Sarah's lawyer attempted to paint her as a victim of her father's overbearing nature, suggesting the will was unfair and that she was simply reacting to years of emotional neglect. He tried to portray Buster as a mere pet that she had an understandable aversion to, not as a target of malicious intent. He even hinted at a possible framing, suggesting that someone else might have administered the poison and Sarah was being made a scapegoat. But the prosecution was prepared. They presented the details of Sarah's online search history, which included inquiries about the availability and effects of strychnine. They also presented evidence of her financial struggles and her recent conversations with friends, where she had expressed extreme animosity towards Buster and her father's prioritization of the dog's welfare. My own testimony regarding her statements at the vet's office, her admission of resentment, and her desire for Buster to be gone was crucial. The prosecution emphasized the deliberate nature of her actions, the planning involved, and the severity of the attempted poisoning. The prosecution's argument was clear and damning. Sarah, driven by a toxic mix of greed and resentment, had attempted to poison her father's beloved dog to remove him as a perceived obstacle to her inheritance. Her actions were not impulsive but deliberate, evidenced by her online searches and the presence of the poison. The judge, after hearing the evidence, found sufficient probable cause to send the case to trial. The weight of it all was crushing. In the midst of this legal turmoil, my relationship with Sarah was irrevocably broken. We communicated only through lawyers. The warm, loving daughter I had raised was lost to me, replaced by a defendant in a criminal trial, her actions a testament to a darkness I had never suspected. I decided to revise my will again. The animal sanctuary would still benefit, but I ensured that Buster would be placed in the care of a trusted friend, with a substantial trust fund established specifically for his ongoing expenses, entirely managed by my lawyer to prevent any access or influence from Sarah. I also made provisions for my estate to be used to support animal welfare organizations focused on rehabilitation and rescue, a testament to Buster's resilience and the many animals like him who deserved a chance at a happy life. The trial itself was a grueling ordeal. Witness after witness was called. Expert toxicologists testified about the potency of strychnine and the symptoms Buster had exhibited. My own emotional testimony was replayed, with Sarah's tearful, yet ultimately unconvincing, denials. The defense continued its strategy of minimizing Sarah's intent, portraying her as a misguided young woman who made a terrible mistake. They argued that she never intended for Buster to die, only to perhaps make him ill enough to be sent away. But the evidence of strychnine, a deadly poison, made that argument ring hollow. The jury deliberated for 2 days. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Every tick of the clock seemed to amplify the dread in my heart. I sat beside Mr. Henderson, my hand resting on Buster's head as he lay quietly at my feet, his presence a silent testament to the fight he had endured. Finally, the jury foreman stood. The verdict was read, each word a hammer blow, each syllable carrying the weight of justice, or at least a legal resolution. We find the defendant, Sarah Adams, guilty of animal poisoning and attempted cruelty. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Sarah flinched, her face pale and drawn. She didn't cry this time. There was only a blank, stunned expression. The judge, his face somber, addressed Sarah directly. "Ms. Adams, your actions were not only a profound betrayal of your father and your family, but a reprehensible act of cruelty towards an innocent creature. The law will not stand for such barbarity." The sentence was severe, reflecting the gravity of her crime. Prison time, probation, mandatory counseling, and a lifetime ban on owning or being in proximity to animals. It was a harsh sentence, but one that felt, in some strange way, like a necessary consequence. It was not the daughter I had wanted to see punished, but the actions were undeniable and had to be addressed. The aftermath was a strange blend of relief and profound sadness. Relief that Buster was safe, that justice, of a sort, had been served. Sadness for the daughter I had lost, for the family that had been shattered by greed and resentment. I began the slow process of healing. My relationship with Buster deepened. He was a constant reminder of the love that endured, the loyalty that was unwavering, and the inherent goodness that existed, even in the face of immense darkness. The house began to feel like a home again, filled with the gentle sounds of Buster's breathing, his soft snores, and the happy thud of his tail against the floor. The memories of that terrifying morning would always be etched in my mind, but they were gradually being overlaid by the quiet comfort of Buster's presence, a constant affirmation that love, in its purest form, could indeed conquer all. I continued my work at the sanctuary, now with a renewed sense of purpose. I wanted to honor Buster's resilience, to give other abandoned and abused animals the chance at a life filled with love and security that they deserved. Sarah's sentence meant she wouldn't be able to access any inheritance for a significant period, if ever. This meant my planned donations would go ahead as intended, a silver lining in the dark cloud that had enveloped my life. The path ahead would not be easy. The scar left by Sarah's actions would likely never fully heal. But with Buster by my side, a symbol of hope and unwavering devotion, I knew I could face whatever the future held. My family had been broken, but my heart, though wounded, was still capable of love. And that love, in the form of my devoted golden retriever, was enough to see me through. The world had shown me its darkest corners, but it had also shown me the enduring power of loyalty and the simple, profound comfort of a wagging tail. My daughter had tried to poison my dog, and in doing so she had poisoned our family, but she had not managed to poison my love for my faithful companion, nor my belief in the fundamental goodness of the world. I had her arrested at the vet's office, and in that moment, I had chosen the life of my beloved Buster over the daughter who had tried to take it from him. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, but it was the right one. The courtroom, after the verdict, felt both hushed and deafeningly loud. Sarah's stunned silence was more unnerving than her earlier outbursts. As the judge pronounced sentence, a cold, clinical finality settled over the room. Prison, counseling, a ban on animals. Each word was a nail in the coffin of the daughter I thought I knew. The immediate aftermath was a surreal blur of legal paperwork, hushed consultations with Mr. Henderson, and the constant, comforting weight of Buster's head on my lap as we navigated the exit. The stark reality of Sarah's conviction, the irreversible damage done, was a suffocating blanket. The drive home was a silent testament to the chasm that now existed between us. Buster, sensing my turmoil, stayed glued to my side, his warm body a small, steady anchor in the chaos. The house, which had felt so empty and accusatory in the days following Sarah's arrest, now seemed to hold a fragile stillness. Buster's recovery was remarkable. He ate with gusto, his tail gave tentative, then enthusiastic, wags, and his eyes, though still sometimes shadowed with the memory of pain, were bright again. He was a fighter, a survivor, and in his resilience I found a flicker of hope. But the legal proceedings, while concluded, had left their own indelible marks. Sarah's bail conditions had been strict, but the emotional distance was far more profound. Communication was solely through lawyers, a sterile exchange of facts and legal maneuvers that felt like a mockery of our past relationship. My attempts to reach out directly had been met with silence, or worse, the chillingly detached responses from her court-appointed counsel. It was as if the daughter I had raised, the one who had laughed with me, confided in me, and even argued with me, had been replaced by a ghost, a defendant in a legal drama. The will, which had served as the tragic catalyst for this entire nightmare, became a focal point of my legal strategy. Mr. Henderson, ever diligent, explained the ramifications of Sarah's conviction. Under the Slayer statute, in our jurisdiction, Mr. Adams, he'd informed me, his tone grave, a beneficiary who causes the death of the decedent, or in this case, attempts to cause grievous harm that results in the decedent's death, can forfeit their inheritance. While Buster survived, Sarah's intent and actions are unequivocally criminal. We can absolutely contest her inheritance rights. This brought a sliver of grim satisfaction. The idea of Sarah benefiting financially from her monstrous act was unbearable. But even this legal victory felt hollow. It was about money, about legal technicalities, not about the fractured family I mourned. I revised the will once more, a deeply emotional process. Buster, my constant companion and the innocent victim, was to be cared for by a trusted friend, a retired veterinarian with whom I had a long-standing relationship. A substantial trust was established for his lifelong care, managed by Mr. Henderson's firm to ensure Sarah's influence, direct or indirect, would be non-existent. The remainder of my estate would still go to the animal sanctuary, as originally intended, but the provisions were now ironclad, designed to prevent any possibility of Sarah's involvement or benefit. It was a tangible way to assert my will, to protect Buster, and to ensure my legacy served the cause I believed in, uncorrupted by my daughter's darkness. The community's reaction was a mixed bag, ranging from hushed sympathy to outright avoidance. In our small town, news of the arrest and subsequent trial had spread like wildfire. Neighbors I'd known for years offered awkward condolences, their eyes filled with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Some simply looked away, unable to meet my gaze, as if my daughter's crime was somehow contagious. It was a deeply isolating experience. My focus narrowed to Buster and the quiet rhythm of our days. His steady presence was a balm to my frayed nerves. I found myself constantly observing him, a low hum of anxiety, a permanent fixture in my stomach, a residual fear that the poison might have caused long-term damage, or worse, that Sarah might find some way to retaliate. The legal process, even after the conviction, was a slow, drawn-out affair. Appeals were filed, arguments presented, and the bureaucratic machinery of justice churned on. Sarah was serving her sentence, but the legal proceedings continued, a constant reminder of the trauma. Mr. Henderson kept me updated, his reports detailing the ongoing legal wrangling, the attempts by Sarah's defense to mitigate her sentence, and the prosecution's unwavering stance on the severity of her crime. One of the most difficult aspects of this period was confronting the question of *Y. I replayed every interaction with Sarah, searching for clues, for early warning signs I might have missed. Was it the entitlement that had always simmered beneath the surface, the casual disregard for rules and consequences? Or was it something far more deeply rooted, a malignancy I had been blind to? I recalled her occasional resentment towards Buster, her complaints that he took up my time and attention. But I had always dismissed it as childish jealousy, a phase she would outgrow. Never in my wildest nightmares had I imagined it would escalate to attempted murder. The will had been the trigger, yes, but the underlying issues were clearly more complex. Her perception of fairness, her sense of entitlement to my wealth, had been twisted into a monstrous justification for violence. She saw Buster not as a beloved family member, but as a rival, an obstacle to her perceived birthright. That the thought of Buster receiving a portion of my estate, a portion she felt was rightfully hers, could drive her to such extremes was a devastating revelation. It painted a chilling picture of her inner world, a world where love and loyalty were secondary to material gain and unearned privilege. As the legal process continued, I found myself drawn to the sanctuary more and more. The quiet dedication of the staff, the gentle trust in the eyes of the rescued animals, provided a stark contrast to the betrayal I had experienced. I began volunteering my time, helping with the animals, assisting with administrative tasks, anything to immerse myself in a world of uncomplicated love and purpose. It was there, surrounded by creatures who had known hardship but still offered unconditional affection, that I truly began to process the enormity of what had happened. During one of my volunteer sessions, I was tending to a timid German shepherd who had been rescued from an abusive situation. As I gently brushed his matted fur, he leaned into my touch, his tail giving a tentative thump against the kennel floor. In that moment, I saw Buster's resilience, his capacity for forgiveness, and the enduring power of kindness. It solidified my resolve to not let Sarah's darkness extinguish the light in my life, or in the lives of other animals. Mr. Henderson eventually informed me of the final disposition of Sarah's appeal. While the conviction stood, some of the harsher sentencing guidelines had been slightly adjusted, a common occurrence in appeals. She would still serve a significant prison term, followed by probation and mandatory counseling. The lifetime ban on owning animals remained in place, a small victory in the face of overwhelming loss. The news of the final sentencing brought a strange sense of closure, albeit a somber one. It was a legal resolution, a confirmation that her actions had consequences. But it couldn't bring back the daughter I remembered, the daughter who existed only in my memories now. The house, once a symbol of shared life and familial warmth, had transformed into a repository of painful memories and quiet vigils. I found myself spending more and more time outdoors, in the garden, with Buster. We'd sit on the porch swing, the gentle creak a familiar sound, Buster's warm weight, a comforting presence against my leg. The world outside our small bubble continued, oblivious to the seismic shift that had occurred within our family. The sanctuary became my refuge. I poured my energy into it, working with the staff, expanding our reach, ensuring that the resources I had committed would make a tangible difference. The board of directors was supportive, understanding the depth of my commitment and the personal tragedy that fueled it. They recognized that my experience, however horrific, had given me a unique perspective on the vulnerability of animals and the importance of protecting them. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Buster and I walked through the sanctuary grounds, we encountered a group of volunteers preparing to transport a litter of orphaned puppies to a foster home. Their small, mewling cries filled the air, a sound that was both heartbreaking and full of promise. I knelt down, letting Buster sniff at the tiny newcomers, his tail giving a slow, gentle wag, a silent acknowledgement of their innocent vulnerability. It was a moment of profound clarity. My daughter had tried to destroy something pure and innocent, and in doing so, she had revealed the worst of humanity. But here, in the sanctuary, I saw the best of humanity: compassion, dedication, and an unwavering belief in second chances. As the years began to roll by, the sharp edges of the pain began to soften, replaced by a dull, persistent ache. Buster remained my constant shadow, his loyalty a silent, unwavering testament to the love that had been so nearly extinguished. He was a living, breathing reminder of what I had fought for, what I had saved. His presence was a constant affirmation that even in the darkest of times, love, in its purest, most devoted form, could endure. I received occasional, meticulously worded updates on Sarah's progress from Mr. Henderson. She was attending her mandated counseling sessions, her responses reportedly showing a gradual shift from defensiveness to a nascent understanding of her actions. However, the ban on animal contact was absolute, and the prospect of any future reconciliation remained a distant, uncertain horizon. The scars ran too deep, the betrayal too profound. The relationship was fractured beyond repair, a casualty of her greed and her inability to comprehend the value of loyalty and love. The animal sanctuary flourished under my continued patronage and active involvement. The provisions in my will, now unchallengeable and irrevocably set, ensured its long-term stability. I found a peculiar solace in this, a sense of continuity and purpose that transcended the personal tragedy. It was a way of honoring Buster, of honoring the innocent creatures who deserved a life free from cruelty and neglect. One quiet evening, as I sat by the fireplace, Buster asleep at my feet, I reflected on the journey. It had been a descent into a darkness I never anticipated, a confrontation with a side of my own child that was both terrifying and utterly alien. But it had also been a journey of profound discovery. I had learned about the depths of human depravity, but also about the extraordinary resilience of the animal spirit and the enduring strength of my own capacity for love and protection. My daughter had tried to poison my dog, and in doing so, she had irrevocably altered the course of our lives. She had attempted to extinguish the brightest light in my world, the unwavering devotion of my loyal companion. But she had failed. Buster had survived, his spirit unbroken, his love for me undimmed, and in that survival, in his continued presence, I found a quiet triumph. The family I knew was gone, shattered by a betrayal of unimaginable cruelty. But my heart, though wounded, was not broken. It was filled with a love for Buster that was deeper, more profound, forged in the fires of adversity. That love, that unwavering loyalty, was my sanctuary, my anchor, and my enduring hope. The world had shown me its ugliest face through my daughter's actions, but it had also shown me the most beautiful through the unconditional love of my golden retriever. And that, I realized, was enough. The quietude of the sanctuary, once a welcome balm, now often felt like a hollow echo. The meticulous care I poured into its operations, the endless meetings with staff, the constant evaluation of new rescues, all served as a deliberate, almost desperate, attempt to fill the void left by Sarah's absence. It wasn't just the physical distance, the legal barriers that kept us apart. It was the profound, unbridgeable gulf that her actions had carved between us. Even with Buster's steady presence, a low thrum of unease persisted. Every news report about animal cruelty, every stray dog I saw on the street, sent a tremor of anxiety through me. A phantom echo of the poison, a chilling reminder of how close I had come to losing him. The community, while initially a source of isolating judgment, had slowly begun to shift. As the sanctuary's profile grew, largely due to my increased involvement and financial backing, a grudging respect began to emerge. Neighbors who had once averted their gaze now offered tentative smiles. Some even started to volunteer, drawn by the palpable sense of purpose that permeated the grounds. They saw not just the tragic story that had brought me there, but the tangible good that was being done. It was a slow, arduous process of rebuilding trust, not with the world at large, but within myself. I was no longer just the father of a convicted criminal. I was a protector, a benefactor, a champion for those who had no voice. However, my focus on the sanctuary, while therapeutic, couldn't entirely shield me from the lingering repercussions of Sarah's crime. The legal battles, though ostensibly concluded, continued in subtle, insidious ways. Sarah's defense team, persistent in their efforts to mitigate her sentence and explore any avenues for appeal, often necessitated further legal consultations with Mr. Henderson. These discussions, though framed in the language of legal strategy, were constant, unwelcome reminders of the ongoing legal drama, the slow grind of the justice system that still held my daughter captive. Each report, each updated brief, felt like another turn of the screw, tightening the coil of my grief and resentment. One particularly trying afternoon, Mr. Henderson called with news that sent a fresh wave of dread through me. Sarah's legal team had filed a motion challenging the validity of my revised will, specifically targeting the provisions for Buster's lifelong care and the trust established to manage them. Their argument, I learned with a sickening lurch, centered on the claim of undue influence, alleging that my emotional state following the attack had rendered me susceptible to manipulation, particularly in matters concerning Buster. The implication was clear. They were attempting to leverage Sarah's conviction to their advantage, to argue that my actions were not a reflection of my true intent, but a consequence of my grief and fear. This renewed legal offensive felt like a slap in the face. It was a blatant attempt to exploit the very tragedy that had shattered my life, to twist my love for Buster into a legal weapon against me. The thought of Sarah, or her representatives, attempting to dictate the terms of Buster's inheritance, to potentially siphon funds intended for his well-being, was unconscionable. It ignited a fire within me, a fierce protectiveness that dwarfed the weariness I had been feeling. "They're trying to argue that your decisions regarding Buster were made under duress, Mr. Adams," Mr. Henderson explained, his voice calm and steady, a welcome counterpoint to my rising panic. "They're suggesting that your focus on him was an overreaction, a symptom of your distress, and that therefore the will doesn't accurately reflect your wishes." "My wishes?" I scoffed, the anger bubbling to the surface. "My wishes are perfectly clear. Buster is to be cared for, always, and Sarah is to have no further access to my assets. This is not duress. This is justice." "I understand your frustration, sir," Mr. Henderson replied, his tone measured. "And I assure you, we will vigorously defend your will. We have ample documentation, your own sworn statements, and the testimonies of those who witnessed Sarah's actions. The intent behind your revised will is unequivocally clear. However, these legal maneuvers are designed to be obstructive. They will prolong the process and likely incur further legal costs. The news of the renewed legal challenges left me feeling exposed and vulnerable. It was as if the legal system, even after its initial pronouncements, was determined to keep the wound of Sarah's betrayal fresh. The sanctuary, my haven, now felt like a potential battleground, a place where the fight for justice, for Buster's security, would continue. The emotional toll of this renewed legal skirmish was significant. I found myself replaying the attack on Buster, the sickening realization of Sarah's intent, the coldness in her eyes. Each memory, once a source of pain, now fueled a grim determination. I would not let them take this away from me, not after everything. Buster, sensing my agitation, would nudge my hand with his head, his presence a grounding force. His quiet resilience, his unwavering affection, served as a constant reminder of what truly mattered. During this period, my interactions with Sarah remained strictly through legal channels. The communications were sterile, factual exchanges, devoid of any personal connection. I received brief, formal updates on her prison life, her participation in therapy sessions, her adherence to the rules. There were no letters, no calls, no personal overtures. It was as if the daughter I had loved had been entirely erased, replaced by a legal entity, a defendant, in a perpetual trial. The media, having initially feasted on the sensational details of the case, had largely moved on, but the story occasionally resurfaced. Local news outlets, in their desire for follow-up stories, would occasionally inquire about the aftermath, about Sarah's progress. I consistently declined interviews, preferring to maintain a low profile to shield Buster from any further public scrutiny. The sanctuary, however, became a reluctant point of interest. Journalists, seeking a more human angle, often tried to connect the dots between my wealth, Sarah's crime, and my philanthropic endeavors. One particular journalist, a young woman named Emily Carter, proved particularly persistent. She had a reputation for tenacity, for digging beneath the surface. Initially, I rebuffed her requests for an interview, but she continued to send emails, then letters, each one more thoughtfully worded than the last. She expressed a genuine interest not just in the sensational aspects, but in the psychological impact, the long-term consequences of such a devastating betrayal. Reluctantly, I agreed to a brief, informal meeting at the sanctuary, with Buster by my side. Emily arrived, a notebook and recorder in hand, but her demeanor was far from aggressive. She approached Buster with a gentle smile, and he responded with his usual quiet curiosity. As we spoke, she asked about Buster's recovery, about my motivations for supporting the sanctuary, and subtly about my feelings regarding Sarah. "It's a remarkable transformation for Buster," Emily observed, her gaze lingering on the golden retriever who was now contentedly chewing on a well-loved toy. "He truly is a survivor, and the work you're doing here is incredible." "He's my world," I replied, my voice softer than I intended. "And this place, it's where I feel I can make some difference, some amends, perhaps." Emily's questions began to steer towards the family dynamic. "It's difficult to imagine a parent going through what you have," she said, her voice laced with a genuine empathy that I hadn't encountered in a long time. "How do you cope with the severance?" The word severance hung in the air, a stark, clinical descriptor of the emotional devastation. "I focus on Buster," I said, the familiar refrain. "And on this, on ensuring that animals like him are safe, that they have a chance." As the conversation progressed, Emily revealed a personal connection to animal welfare, a childhood dog that had been abused. This shared vulnerability, this common ground, began to chip away at my defenses. I found myself speaking more openly, not about the details of Sarah's crime, but about the profound sense of loss, the fractured reality of my life. "I'm not looking for a sensational exposé, Mr. Adams," Emily said as our meeting drew to a close. I'm interested in the human story, the resilience of the spirit, and the enduring power of love, even in the face of such darkness. Her words resonated deeply. They echoed the sentiments I had been grappling with myself, the struggle to find light in the pervasive shadow. I agreed to allow her to write a piece, with the strict understanding that Buster's privacy would be paramount, and that any discussion of Sarah would be handled with the utmost sensitivity, focusing on the broader themes of redemption and recovery. The article, when it was published, was a revelation. Emily had captured the essence of the sanctuary, the dedication of its staff, and my personal journey with a remarkable nuance. She spoke of Buster's quiet strength, of my unwavering commitment to his well-being, and framed my philanthropic efforts not as a consequence of tragedy, but as a testament to the transformative power of compassion. There was no judgment, no sensationalism, only a deeply human narrative of loss, resilience, and hope. The article had an unexpected ripple effect. It brought a fresh wave of support to the sanctuary, both in terms of donations and volunteer interest. More importantly, it seemed to subtly shift the community's perception of me. I was no longer just the man whose daughter had committed a heinous crime. I was someone who had faced immense adversity and emerged with a profound purpose. Despite this positive shift, the legal challenge to my will continued to cast a long shadow. The court dates were set, and Mr. Henderson prepared our defense with his usual thoroughness. He meticulously gathered evidence, interviewed witnesses, and built a compelling case for the validity of my revised will. The sheer audacity of Sarah's legal team, their attempt to weaponize my grief, fueled my resolve. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about protecting Buster, about ensuring his future was secure, free from any taint of Sarah's malice. During this protracted legal battle, a strange phenomenon began to occur. I started receiving anonymous letters, small tokens of support, a bouquet of flowers left on my doorstep, a box of Buster's favorite treats mysteriously appearing by the sanctuary's entrance, a prepaid gift card to his veterinary clinic. These gestures, though small, were a source of quiet comfort, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in this fight. They were anonymous acts of kindness, a silent acknowledgement of the good work being done, and perhaps a subtle defiance against Sarah's legal machinations. The sanctuary became more than just a place of work. It became my sanctuary. I found solace in the routines, in the simple act of caring for creatures who asked for nothing but love and security. I learned to anticipate Buster's needs, to read his subtle cues, to find comfort in his unwavering presence. He was my anchor, my constant, the living embodiment of everything I held dear. Then, a significant development occurred. Mr. Henderson informed me that Sarah's legal team had made a surprising offer. They were willing to drop the challenge to my will, provided that I agreed to certain concessions regarding Sarah's future visitation rights to my property once her sentence was completed. The offer was couched in terms of reconciliation and family unity, a thinly veiled attempt to regain some semblance of control, some residual benefit from my estate. I reread Mr. Henderson's email several times, the words blurring before my eyes. Visitation rights? After what she had done? The idea of her setting foot on my property, of her being allowed anywhere near Buster, was abhorrent. But the legal battle was taking its toll, both emotionally and financially, and the thought of prolonging the legal torment, of enduring further public scrutiny, was equally unappealing. I discussed the offer at length with Mr. Henderson. "They're desperate, Mr. Adams," he explained. "They see the strength of our case regarding the will, and they're trying to negotiate from a position of weakness. They likely believe that access to your property, perhaps even future contact with Buster under supervision, would be a significant concession." "Supervision?" I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. How can you supervise someone who tried to murder an animal? The ban on animal contact is absolute for a reason, and we will ensure it remains so, Mr. Henderson assured me. "My proposal is that we concede to a carefully worded agreement regarding your property, with strict stipulations. No animals on the premises when she is present, and all interactions to be supervised by a neutral third party. Furthermore, it will explicitly state that any violation of these terms will nullify the agreement and immediately reinstate the full force of the will's provisions regarding Buster's inheritance. The thought of any concession, however small, gnawed at me, but the prospect of a definitive end to the legal wrangling, of securing Buster's future without further protracted battles, was a powerful motivator. It was a compromise born not of forgiveness, but of pragmatism, of a desire for peace. After much deliberation, and with Buster resting his head on my lap, his warm breath a gentle rhythm against my leg, I agreed. The agreement was meticulously drafted by Mr. Henderson, leaving no room for ambiguity. Sarah would be permitted limited supervised visits to my property, but only after her release from prison and under stringent conditions that explicitly prohibited any contact with animals. It was a hollow victory, a legalistic dance around the shattered fragments of our family, but it was an end to the immediate legal threat. The months that followed were marked by a quiet anticipation. Sarah's release date approached, and with it, a renewed sense of apprehension. I focused my energy on strengthening the sanctuary's infrastructure, implementing new programs for animal rehabilitation, and expanding our outreach to rescue and rehome abused and neglected animals. I found a deep satisfaction in this work, a sense of purpose that had been absent for so long. The day of Sarah's release arrived with a muted sense of dread. I had made arrangements for Buster to stay with a trusted friend, a retired veterinarian who lived several hours away, for a few days. The sanctuary, too, felt like a place I needed to protect from any potential intrusion. Mr. Henderson had arranged for a licensed counselor, approved by the court, to be present for Sarah's first visit to my property. The meeting was brief, sterile, and profoundly disappointing. Sarah, a shadow of the daughter I once knew, arrived with the counselor, her demeanor guarded, her eyes distant. She offered a perfunctory apology, a rehearsed statement about her regret. But there was no genuine remorse, no flicker of the daughter I remembered. The legal proceedings, the counseling sessions, had seemingly smoothed over the rough edges, creating a facade of contrition, but the underlying emptiness remained. As she spoke, I observed her carefully, searching for any sign of recognition, any hint of the daughter I had raised. But there was nothing. Her gaze flickered over the manicured lawns, the blooming flowers, but it never settled on me, never met my eyes with any warmth or affection. The counselor guided the conversation, ensuring adherence to the strict protocol, but the conversation itself was a hollow ritual, a performance of familial duty. When the counselor informed Sarah that her time was up, she simply nodded, offered another brief, detached apology, and left, disappearing as quickly as she had arrived. The silence she left behind was deafening, a stark reminder of the irreparable damage that had been done. The following weeks were a quiet period of adjustment. Buster returned, his tail wagging enthusiastically, his presence a comforting balm. The house, though still holding echoes of the past, felt a little less haunted. I continued my work at the sanctuary, finding renewed purpose in the simple act of caring for animals, in providing them with the love and security they deserved. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Buster and I walked through the sanctuary grounds, we encountered a group of volunteers preparing to transport a litter of orphaned puppies to a foster home. Their small, mewling cries filled the air, a sound that was both heartbreaking and full of promise. I knelt down, letting Buster sniff at the tiny newcomers, his tail giving a slow, gentle wag, a silent acknowledgement of their innocent vulnerability. It was a moment of profound clarity. My daughter had tried to destroy something pure and innocent, and in doing so she had revealed the worst of humanity. But here, in the sanctuary, I saw the best of humanity, compassion, dedication, and an unwavering belief in second chances. This realization brought a quiet peace. My daughter's darkness had not extinguished the light. It had, in fact, illuminated it. The sanctuary, born of tragedy, had become a beacon of hope, a testament to the enduring power of kindness and compassion. Buster, my loyal companion, was a living embodiment of that hope, his resilience, a constant inspiration. As the years began to roll by, the sharp edges of the pain began to soften, replaced by a dull, persistent ache. Buster remained my constant shadow, his loyalty a silent, unwavering testament to the love that had been so nearly extinguished. He was a living, breathing reminder of what I had fought for, what I had saved. His presence was a constant affirmation that even in the darkest of times, love, in its purest, most devoted form, could endure. I received occasional, meticulously worded updates on Sarah's progress from Mr. Henderson. She was attending her mandated counseling sessions, her responses reportedly showing a gradual shift from defensiveness to a nascent understanding of her actions. However, the ban on animal contact was absolute, and the prospect of any future reconciliation remained a distant, uncertain horizon. The scars ran too deep, the betrayal too profound. The relationship was fractured beyond repair, a casualty of her greed and her inability to comprehend the value of loyalty and love. The animal sanctuary flourished under my continued patronage and active involvement. The provisions in my will, now unchallengeable and irrevocably set, ensured its long-term stability. I found a peculiar solace in this, a sense of continuity and purpose that transcended the personal tragedy. It was a way of honoring Buster, of honoring the innocent creatures who deserved a life free from cruelty and neglect. One quiet evening as I sat by the fireplace, Buster asleep at my feet, I reflected on the journey. It had been a descent into a darkness I never anticipated, a confrontation with a side of my own child that was both terrifying and utterly alien. But it had also been a journey of profound discovery. I had learned about the depths of human depravity, but also about the extraordinary resilience of the animal spirit and the enduring strength of my own capacity for love and protection. My daughter had tried to poison my dog, and in doing so, she had irrevocably altered the course of our lives. She had attempted to extinguish the brightest light in my world, the unwavering devotion of my loyal companion. But she had failed. Buster had survived, his spirit unbroken, his love for me undimmed. And in that survival, in his continued presence, I found a quiet triumph. The family I knew was gone, shattered by a betrayal of unimaginable cruelty. But my heart, though wounded, was not broken. It was filled with a love for Buster that was deeper, more profound, forged in the fires of adversity. That love, that unwavering loyalty, was my sanctuary, my anchor, and my enduring hope. The world had shown me its ugliest face through my daughter's actions, but it had also shown me the most beautiful through the unconditional love of my golden retriever. And that, I realized, was enough.